Portuguese Fintech Association. Thank you for being here. This is not really a presentation, it's a family talk, so feel free to interrupt, ask questions, make critiques whenever you want. I'll try to be as brief as possible, and I want to talk about three main points. First, the Portuguese economic and financial situation, then the actual stage of development of the financial, insurance and fintech markets, and then a little bit about the opportunities that there are in Portugal. Starting with the economic and financial situation, as you know, Portugal went to a major economic and financial crisis due to the problems in the public accounts. The government deficit increased, the government debt went out of control, but necessary measures were taken, and the debt to GDP ratio is right now under control and decreasing. All the main rating agencies are starting to upgrade our rating. The measures that were taken to resolve the financial problems were mainly increases in taxes and reductions of transfers. The private income decreased, the private consumption decreased, but since then things start to improve, and right now we are at pre-crisis levels. Same happened with GDP, that has been increased right now for more than 6 years, and it has already surpassed the pre-crisis levels. The main drivers of this recovery, of this GDP recovery, have been wages and exports. When the measures to tackle the public debt problems were taken, the real wages fell sharply in Portugal, but since then they have been increasing slowly. They are starting to pick up, but they are yet slightly below the pre-crisis levels. The exports have been increased steadily since the crisis due to increased competitiveness of Portuguese economy, and the main drivers of these exports have been mainly technological goods and services. We have changed a little bit our standard of specialization and international trade. Coming back to the financial system, the impact of the crisis was very profound, and we haven't yet fully recovered from this impact, and that's important from a fintech perspective. Due to the devaluation of public bonds in Portugal and due to non-performing loans, we have a major problem with non-performing loans, and the balance sheet of banks have been decreasing and is still decreasing. The banks are starting to make some profits, but they aren't yet strong enough to improve the balance sheets. Consequently, we have had a very strong credit crunch, and as illustrated by this chart, the loans to private sector have been falling and haven't yet recovered. The investment, the gross fixed capital formation has recovered from the worst point during the crisis, but haven't yet recovered to the pre-crisis level. This situation, of course, we right now have overcome almost all paths created by the economic and financial crisis, but this adjustment path have had an impact on development of the financial and fintech sector that creates special characteristics in the fintech sector that are relevant for anyone interested in Portugal and in fintech and insurtech sectors in Portugal. Let's see. Banks, starting with banks and other financial companies. Their main worry, their main strategic objectives in last years have been to adjust balance sheets. Their growth strategies and fintech strategies are starting to being developed. This means there's a huge opportunity to work with Portuguese banks. Same happens, probably lagging a little behind with the insurance companies that, as in any other place, lag a little bit in development behind the banks. Right now, the regulators are very worried about financial stability and protection of consumers. They follow closely the European regulation, but they are very conservative. So we in Portugal usually adopt European regulations in a more conservative way and with a time lag, a substantive time lag. Portugal is right now is a very business-friendly country. We are in the top places in the competitiveness and business-friendliest places in all classifications. But our financial and insurance regulations are not much better than the EU average. Due to the slow development of growth strategies and fintech strategies of banks and insurance, fintechs started to appear to leverage the existing new technologies and the Portuguese resources. Some fintechs that were born in Portugal, like Fedzai, Cedars, now James, for instance. We have been specializing in payments, in crowdfunding, lending, and our fintechs have been working more in collaborative approaches to the market than in competitive approaches, meaning that they work more with incumbents and traditional institutions than trying to sell directly to consumers. There are a lot of Portuguese fintechs working on onboarding, regtech, credit risk analysis, asset management, closely with Portuguese, British banks. However, you are starting to entering the more interesting part. Our companies have several problems, limitations. First, the access to capital. They can find in Portugal small amounts of seed capital, but whenever they won't scale up, they have problems. And their usual solution has been to go to London to rounds of around a couple dozen million dollars or euros, and to the United States whenever we enter hundreds of millions of dollars. Other problems of Portuguese companies is marketing resources, expertise. We are not very good in marketing in Portugal. The Portuguese market is small. We are a country with 10 million people, and that creates several problems to develop business-to-consumer solutions. And finally, the regulatory constraints that we all know all around the world, even in Europe. In this context, the alternatives that the Portuguese fintechs and insurtechs have followed have been adoption of business-to-business strategies, partnerships with Portuguese and international banks and other fintechs, and sometimes moving to other regulatory jurisdictions, for instance, in Eastern Europe, United Kingdom, to operate in a more friendly and friendly regulatory environment. So, taking all this into account, we can say that the Portuguese Fintech and InsurTech system is very peculiar, very different from the ecosystems around Europe. We have a couple of strengths, very strong, and you probably know some of them. For instance, we've got very good human resources and the technological and programming area, engineers and programming. Right now, major tech companies, Google for instance, are installing research and development centers in Portugal. The engineers and programmers are, in general terms, very good and relatively cheap in European terms. We've got some very good universities and research and development labs. Our infrastructure is communications, roads, whatever, are the best in Europe. We've got a very good and very complete network of hubs, accelerators, incubators, all kind of institutions to support startups and development of companies. And they are a large number, and they are all very different one from the others in terms of size, in terms of rules to operate, because they are not government owned, they are competing between themselves. And one of our strengths is, of course, a growing and unsatisfied demand for capital. It's important from the perspective of a company wanting to operate in Portugal. Our weaknesses are, of course, and you saw about the problems with financial institutions and banks, capital, lack of capital, a problem with capital. Our marketing and sales expertise. We haven't yet as many international partnerships as we need, as we want, as our companies, Fintech and InsurTech companies need, and the regulatory frameworks, of course. The most important point from your point of view, I suppose, how this peculiar environment and the set of institutions and of companies can be leveraged by you. There are four main approaches to the Portuguese market. First, I call it research and development, and this is the approach followed by tech companies. Installing research and development centers in Portugal using the human resources, engineering and programmers, and the infrastructures. Second is, I call it Portuguese business-to-business market expansion. Try to sell solutions developed abroad to Portuguese banks and financial institutions. As I said, they are starting to develop right now growth strategies and fintech strategies. It's the right moment to talk with them. The third strategy that I listed here, I call it international markets product expansion. We have very good human resources, engineer, programmers. We have lots of groups developing solutions in universities, incubators, in the market already. This kind of companies, of fintechs, want partnerships. It's very easy to make good partnership agreements with this company and sell their solutions or services abroad. And the fourth strategy is to try the business-to-consumer market in Portugal. This is probably easy for a larger company that is already operating in another country and try to adapt slightly their product to the Portuguese market. we at AFIP, me and Luís Miguel are members of the AFIP board. We are an organization that tries to develop the Fintech and InsurTech ecosystem in Portugal. We are an ecosystem association. Our members are banks, insurers, technological companies, lawyers, startups, fintechs, insurtechs. So we are always trying to help try to develop the ecosystem, helping the Portuguese companies, helping the international companies that try to work in Portugal, promoting networking, sharing knowledge, and making some lobby at the Portuguese and international level. We've got here my contacts. Miguel is over there. Whenever you want, you can contact us. We are going to be around. But if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer, or try to answer. Thank you. Yes, we have. We implemented in Portugal the European regulation directive on crowdfunding in 2017, I suppose, and amended the directive last year, take into account the anti-money laundering and KYC directive, European directive. I suppose that the adaptation to Portuguese law was at the beginning of this year or the end of last year. But we are going to adopt as soon as possible the new European Union directive that is going to start having legal effects, I suppose, this year or next year. I'm not sure yet. The secondary market. Yes, it's possible. On the crowdfunding market, there's a problem. That's all the investors need to be registered with Portuguese tax authorities. Okay, that is not a problem to a large investor. It's a problem to a small investor that don't want to have the problems to invest a small amount in a small project. But there's no problems for banks, international insurance companies, whatever, to invest in Portugal, and the other way around also no problem. Okay, we are going to be around, so if you want, we can talk later. Thank you very much.